I am Alexander Mercer, 34 years old, and at 6 o'clock this morning, a deputy sheriff handed me an eviction notice for a house I own free and clear. Before I tell you how I ended up watching my own parents get arrested in a courtroom less than 48 hours later, tell me where you folks are watching from in the comments. I really want to know who is riding shotgun with me on this one. The pounding started before my brain even registered that I was awake. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the kind of deep, metallic thud that vibrates through the frame of the house and straight into your bones. It sounded like authority. It sounded like trouble. I sat bolt upright in bed. My heart was already sprinting, hammering against my ribs. For a second, just a split second, I didn't know what day it was. I looked at the digital clock on my nightstand. The red numbers burned 6:02 a.m. The morning light was barely gray, leaking through the blinds in thin, dusty stripes. My throat felt thick, like I'd swallowed a handful of cotton. I threw the covers off, swinging my legs out of bed. The floorboards were cold under my bare feet. I grabbed a sweatshirt from the chair, pulled it on, and stepped into the hallway. I found myself walking carefully, avoiding the creaky spot on the third step out of habit, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The pounding came again, louder this time, impatient. Sheriff's office. Open the door. A male voice, heavy, authoritative. My hands went cold instantly. It's a specific kind of cold that starts in your fingertips and shoots straight up to your elbows. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I moved the way you move when you work in high-level security architecture, the way I do. Panic makes you sloppy. Sloppy gets you hurt. Sloppy becomes a story other people tell about you at your funeral. I flipped the porch light on and looked through the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the image, but the uniform was unmistakable. A deputy sheriff stood on my front step. He was a big guy, broad shoulders filling out a tan uniform with a black vest. His hand was resting on his belt, near his hip, but not on his weapon. In his other hand, he held a clipboard stacked with papers. Behind him, his patrol car sat at the curb. No sirens. Lights off. He had decided not to wake the whole street, which was a small mercy, I suppose. Then I saw beyond the patrol car. Across the street, half in the shadow of the neighbor's oak tree, there were spectators. It wasn't the neighbors. It was a silver sedan I recognized instantly. And standing next to it were 3 people who were supposed to be my family. My mother, Diane, stood with her arms folded tight across her chest. She was wearing her concerned mother face, but her posture was rigid, expectant. My father, Mark, had his hands buried deep in his coat pockets, staring at my front door with a look I knew well. It was the look of a man waiting for a transaction to clear. And then there was Caleb, my younger brother, the golden child. He was leaning against the fender of a brand new Porsche 911. A car I knew he couldn't afford on his salary. A car that likely cost more than the down payment on a decent house. He was checking his watch, looking bored. Like this was just an inconvenience before his real day started. They weren't surprised to see a deputy on my porch at dawn. They were waiting for the show. They were satisfied. I unlocked the deadbolt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. I opened the door, but I kept the chain on. Just a crack. Enough to talk, not enough to enter. Ma'am. Excuse me, sir. The deputy corrected himself as he saw me. He looked tired. Are you Alexander Mercer? I am, I replied. My voice was rough with sleep, but steady. I made sure of that. He glanced down at the papers on his clipboard, then back up at me. I'm Deputy Romero with the County Sheriff's Office. I'm here regarding a writ of possession. It's an eviction order. The word eviction hit my chest like a physical shove. I felt the air leave my lungs. This is my house, I said. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. Deputy Romero didn't react. He didn't blink. He'd probably heard that sentence 1,000 times from desperate people. He probably hated what came after it every single time. Sir, he said, his tone professional but firm. I'm not here to debate ownership. I'm here to execute a court order. Judgment was entered. You have to vacate the premises. I stared at the paper in his hand. The top sheet was white, crisp, official. My name was printed on it in clean black letters. Alexander Mercer. It looked so bureaucratic, so final. Treated me like a tenant who had missed rent for 6 months. Not the person who paid the property taxes. Not the person who replaced the roof shingles with his own hands last summer. Not the person who planted the dogwood tree out back with his grandfather 20 years ago. You should have done what the family asked, Alex. The voice came from across the street. It was my mother. She wasn't whispering. She wanted the neighbors to hear. She wanted the deputy to hear. She wanted to establish the narrative right now. Pack it up, son, my father added. His voice was lower, flatter, like a verdict. This is happening today. Don't make a scene. Caleb didn't say anything. He just smirked and inspected his fingernails, then patted the hood of his Porsche as if to say, out with the old, in with the new. Deputy Romero's eyes flicked toward them, then back to me. He lowered his voice a fraction, a crack in the professional armor. Do you have somewhere you can go? He asked. The question wasn't kind. It was procedural. It was a question you ask a stray dog before you call animal control. But it made my stomach twist into a hard knot. I'm not going anywhere, I said, locking eyes with him. Not until you show me what this is. He hesitated. He looked at the chain on the door. Then, he lifted the top page slightly and angled the clipboard so I could read it without him having to hand it over. There it was in bold, capitalized letters. Writ of possession. A case number underneath. A court seal. A judge's signature I didn't recognize. My pulse tried to climb. I held it down. I used the breathing technique I learned in high-stress security drills. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask my parents why because I already knew the answer. They didn't need a reason that made sense to me. They only needed a reason that sounded acceptable to strangers. They needed the money. Caleb always needed money. And my house, my grandfather's legacy, was just a pile of equity to them. I pointed to the line near the top of the document. Who filed this? Deputy Romero's gaze followed my finger. He hesitated just long enough to tell me the answer mattered. Sir, he said carefully, the plaintiff on this case is... He stopped mid-sentence. He looked back at the paperwork, squinting in the dim porch light. Then he looked at me again. And his face changed. It wasn't shock. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. It was the look of a man who just realized the villain was standing in plain sight. He cleared his throat once. It was filed by Mark Ward Mercer and Diane Mercer. My parents. I looked past the deputy, straight at them. My parents didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. My mother's chin lifted like she was proud of the line being read out loud. She smoothed her cardigan, playing the role of the long-suffering matriarch finally getting her way. I felt something go still inside me. Clean, cold stillness. It was the death of hope. The death of that tiny, childish part of me that still wanted them to be decent people. Because if the plaintiff was my parents, that meant they hadn't just threatened me. They hadn't just bullied me at Thanksgiving or guilt-tripped me over the phone. They had gone into a courthouse. They had sworn an oath. They had turned themselves into the story's reasonable side. And if there was a writ, it meant they'd already gotten a judgment without me. I kept my voice level. When was this case filed? Deputy Romero checked the page again. Judgment was entered last week. Default judgment. Last week. My mouth went dry. I had been here last week. I had gone to work, come home, watered the plants, slept in this bed. I hadn't been in court. I hadn't been served anything. No deputy at my door. No certified mail. No taped notice on my window. Nothing. Where was I served? I asked. If there's a default judgment, there has to be a proof of service. Deputy Romero looked down again. This time his pause was heavier. He ran his thumb down a section, scanning the dense legal text. Service address listed as... He squinted. 128 Maple Terrace. I didn't answer immediately because my brain was refusing to process the reality of it. Maple Terrace. That wasn't my address. It wasn't my office address. A line stating service had been completed, a signature, a date, a time, and a description that made my skin go cold. Substitute service accepted by adult female occupant at Maple Terrace. Adult female occupant. My parents had used an address they still controlled. Maybe they knew the landlord, maybe they still got mail there, and claimed someone accepted papers on my behalf. I slowly looked across the street. My mother stared back at me with a calm, practiced face. She had rehearsed this. She had planned this. She had gone to that old house, waited for a process server or hired one they knew, and accepted the eviction notice meant for me. And in that moment, I understood the real purpose of this raid at dawn. It wasn't just to humiliate me. It was to rush me. They wanted to force me to pack, leave, lose control of the physical property. They wanted me on the street, scattered, separated from my documents, too overwhelmed to fight back in time. Because if I didn't get a judge to stop this, Deputy Romero would legally remove me from the home my grandfather left me. And once I was out, Caleb and his Porsche would be parked in my driveway within the hour. I swallowed once, keeping my voice low. This house was my grandfather's, I said to Deputy Romero. He left it to me, not them. Deputy Romero didn't argue. He simply held the papers tighter, like he hated being the delivery system for other people's cruelty. Sir, he said, if you believe the court order was obtained improperly, you need to contact the court immediately. You need to file an emergency motion. I can't tell you how to do that, he added quickly, covering his bases. I nodded once. I understand. He glanced back down, then up, and his voice turned even more careful. There's one more thing. This writ authorizes immediate possession. My stomach tightened. Immediate. He looked me straight in the eye. Professional, but with a flicker of human warning. Without a judge's stay, he said. I have to clear this house by noon. Noon. 6 hours. That was the timeline I had to dismantle a conspiracy my family had likely spent months constructing. I didn't stand there arguing with a deputy at my door. Arguing would have given my parents exactly what they wanted. A scene, a story, a reason to point at me and tell the neighbors, see, he's unstable. We had to intervene. So I did the only thing that mattered. I built a record. Deputy, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. I need you to hold that paperwork steady. I'm going to take photos of every single page. Romero hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. He knew this stank. He knew it from the gut instinct that comes with the badge. He held the clipboard up. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking, just a little, but I braced my elbows against the doorframe to steady them. Click, click, click. I captured the case number, the court seal with the judge's signature, the falsified service address at Maple Terrace, and most importantly, the proof of service page where adult female occupant was checked. Thank you, I said. Sir, Romero said, his voice lowering so the vultures across the street couldn't hear. I have to post the notice on the door. It's procedure, but I'm going to go sit in my car for a bit. I have paperwork to catch up on. You have until noon. He was giving me breathing room. He was giving me a head start. I appreciate that, I said. I stepped back inside and shut the door. I slid the deadbolt into place, knowing it was just a psychological barrier now. The law was already inside the house. Through the window, I watched Romero walk back to his cruiser. I saw my father gesture to him, probably asking why I wasn't being dragged out in handcuffs yet. Romero ignored him, got into his car, and started typing on his laptop. My mother looked disappointed. Caleb looked bored again, checking his phone, probably looking for buyers for my house. I turned away from the window and leaned my back against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. I sat there in the hallway of the home my grandfather, Joe, had built with his own hands in the 70s. Grandpa Joe. The smell of sawdust and peppermint candy, that was him. He was the only person in my family who understood the concept of enough. My parents were always chasing the next upgrade, the next status symbol. A bigger boat they never used. a membership to a club they couldn't afford. And when the money ran out, the screaming started. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting on the stairs at 128 Maple Terrace, that cursed address, listening to them fight about credit card bills. "You spent the mortgage money on a ski trip, Mark?" my mother had shrieked. "You bought a fur coat in Florida. Diane, who wears fur in Florida?" he'd screamed back. And then there was Caleb, 5 years old, crying in his room. I went in to comfort him, but my mother swept in, scooped him up, and glared at me. "Don't upset him, Alex. He's sensitive. You're the older one. You should help us, not make trouble." It was always my job to fix it, to sacrifice, to be the adult while they played pretend rich. When Grandpa Joe died 2 years ago, the reading of the will was the most tense hour of my life. My parents expected the house. They had already talked about selling it, knocking it down, building 2 condos on the lot. But Grandpa Joe knew. I remembered the day he told me. We were sitting on the back porch of this house, drinking iced tea. His hands were gnarled with arthritis, wrapped around the glass. "Alex," he'd said, his voice raspy, "people like your father, they're like locusts. They consume. They don't build. When I go, they'll come for this place. I won't let them," I'd promised. "It's not about letting them," he'd said sharply. "It's about paper. The law doesn't care about promises, son. Cares about paper. I'm putting the house in your name. Specifically, ironclad. But they will try. They will try to trick you, guilt you, or steal it. You have to be smarter. Be smarter." I pushed myself up from the floor. Sitting here feeling sorry for myself wasn't being smarter. It was being a victim. I ran to my home office. I didn't grab clothes. I didn't pack a bag. I went straight for the fireproof safe bolted to the floor of the closet. My hands flew over the keypad. Beep, 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 clunk. I pulled out the life or death folder. That's what I called it. My deed. The original probate distribution letter from the estate. The property tax receipts for the last 2 years. All paid from my personal bank account. The homeowner's insurance policy in my name. I shoved them into my leather messenger bag. Then I grabbed my laptop, my chargers, and my portable hard drive. I checked the time. 6:25 a.m. I needed to make a call, but not to a lawyer, not yet. Lawyers took hours to call back. I needed the court. I looked up the number for the county civil court clerk. They didn't open until 8 a.m. I had 90 minutes of dead air before I could even ask for help. Wait, the emergency line. Sometimes there's an automated system to check case status. I dialed the number from the photo I took of the writ. I punched in the case number. Automated voice. Case number CV 2024-8991. Mark Mercer and Diane Mercer versus Alexander Mercer. Status. Closed. Judgment entered. Closed. The word tasted like ash. I needed to think like an architect. When you design a security system, you look for the breach. Where did they get in? They used the wrong address. Maple Terrace. That was the breach. But why Maple Terrace? Why not just claim they served me here and lied about it? Because Maple Terrace allowed them to control the recipient. If they claimed they served me here, Romero would have asked, "Did you see him?" Or "Who opened the door?" By using Maple Terrace, they could use the substitute service loophole. Someone claiming to be a resident accepted it. My mother. It was fraud. Blatant, stupid fraud. But fraud works if the victim doesn't show up to say, "Hey, that's a lie." I went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water standing up. I needed to clear the cotton from my throat. I needed to be articulate. I looked out the window again. The silver sedan was still there. My father was on his phone now, pacing. Caleb was sitting in the driver's seat of the Porsche, revving the engine slightly, just to hear the purr. He was probably imagining pulling it into my garage. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me leave through the front door. I went to the back door, the one that led to the alley. I slipped out, locking it behind me. I cut through the neighbor's yard. Mrs. Higgins, who hated my parents ever since my dad backed into her rose bushes and claimed the bushes jumped out, and made it to the side street where I'd parked my truck the night before because the driveway was being power washed. I got into my truck. It was a sturdy, reliable Ford F-150, not a Porsche, a working vehicle. I started the engine and drove away without looking back at the house. Couldn't look back. If I looked back, I might turn the truck around and do something that would land me in a cell next to them. I drove straight to the courthouse downtown. I sat in the parking lot, watching the sun fully rise, waiting for the doors to unlock. At 7:55 a.m., I was standing at the glass doors. I was the first one in line. The security guard waved me through the metal detector. "Rough morning?" he asked, eyeing my disheveled hair. "You have no idea," I muttered. I sprinted up the stairs to the civil division clerk's office. There was one person at the counter, an older man with thick glasses and a name tag that read Henderson. He looked like he'd been working there since the building was constructed. He was organizing files with a slow, deliberate rhythm. I walked up to the glass partition. "Good morning," I said. "I have an emergency. A writ of possession is being executed on my home at noon today. I was never served. I need to file an emergency motion to stay eviction." Henderson looked up over his glasses. He didn't rush. He assessed me. He saw the sweat on my forehead, the folder in my hand, the desperation in my eyes. "Case number?" he asked. I read it off. He typed it into his computer. Click, clack, click. He frowned. "Mercer versus Mercer. Unlawful detainer. Default judgment entered last Tuesday." "I didn't know about it," I said. "They served me at an address I haven't lived at in 15 years. Henderson pulled up the scanned document on his screen. 128 Maple Terrace? "Yes, that's my parents' old rental. I own the home they're trying to evict me from. Here is the deed." I slid the paper under the glass. Henderson picked it up. He looked at the deed. Then he looked at the screen. Then he looked at the deed again. "Son," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "you're listed as the owner on this deed. But in the file, the plaintiffs filed a lease agreement." "A lease?" I blinked. "I never signed a lease. It's my house." "They filed a copy of a rental agreement, dated 6 months ago, allegedly signed by you, agreeing to pay $3,000 a month in rent to Mark and Diane Mercer." My blood boiled. "That's a lie. I don't pay rent. I pay the mortgage. Can I see the signature?" Henderson turned the monitor. There, at the bottom of a generic rental contract downloaded from the internet, was a signature. Alexander Mercer. But it wasn't my signature. It was shaky. Loops where there should be angles. It looked like someone had tried to copy my signature from a birthday card but got bored halfway through. "That's a forgery," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "And a bad one." Henderson nodded slowly. "I've seen a lot of signatures, son. That one looks creative." "What do I do?" I asked. "The deputy says I'm out at noon." "You file the motion," Henderson said, sliding a packet of forms under the glass. "Motion to stay execution of writ. Motion to vacate default judgment. Fill them out. Now, right here. Don't worry about neatness. Just make it legible." I grabbed a pen and started writing. My hand flew across the page. Plaintiff is a relative. Service address is fraudulent. Lease is forged. Defendant is the fee simple owner of the property. As I was writing, Henderson kept clicking on his computer. He seemed to be digging deeper into the file. "Wait a minute," he murmured. I looked up. "What?" Henderson's face had gone pale. He wasn't looking at the lease anymore. He was looking at something else in the digital file. "Mr. Mercer," he said, and this time he didn't call me son. He used my title. "Did you sign any documents recently? Maybe 2 weeks ago?" "No," I said. "Nothing." "Because there's another document in here," Henderson said. "It wasn't part of the eviction itself, but it was submitted as Exhibit C to prove their standing as landlords." "What is it?" I asked. Henderson printed a page. The printer whirred and spat out a warm sheet of paper. He slid it to me. I looked at it. and the world tilted on its axis. It was a quitclaim deed, dated 2 weeks ago. It stated that Alexander Mercer hereby transferred all rights, title, and interest in the property to Mark and Diane Mercer for the sum of $10. It was signed, notarized, recorded. They didn't just forge a lease, I whispered, the realization crashing down on me like a collapsing building. They stole the house. They literally stole the title. Henderson looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional alarm. If this is recorded, Mr. Mercer, this isn't just an eviction case anymore. This is a felony. Felony. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and dangerous. My parents hadn't just played a dirty trick to kick me out for a few months. They had orchestrated a full-scale theft of my inheritance. They had transferred the title. In the eyes of the county recorder, I didn't own my grandfather's house anymore. Mark and Diane Mercer did. Who notarized this? I asked, my finger hovering over the document. A deed isn't valid without a notary seal. Someone had to stamp this lie to make it real. I looked at the bottom of the page. The stamp was blurry but legible. Carla Mendez, commission number 8842931. Carla, I hissed. You know her? Henderson asked. She's my mother's best friend, I said. They play bridge together every Tuesday. She's been to my birthday parties. She gave me a gift card for my graduation. Well, Henderson said dryly, it looks like she gave your parents a much bigger gift this time. I looked at the date on the notary stamp. The 13th. 2 weeks ago. I was at work on the 13th, I said, thinking aloud. I work in secure architecture. High-level clearance. I have to badge in and out of every door. I was in a server room all day on the 13th. I couldn't have been at a notary table. Can you prove that? Henderson asked. Not to me. To a judge. Yes, I said. I can pull the logs. Good, Henderson said, because you're going to need them. Finish those forms. I'm going to walk this file into Judge Halpern's chambers myself. She hates procedural messiness, and she really hates fraud. I finished the paperwork in record time. I attached the photos I took of the eviction notice. I attached a copy of my real deed. I attached a copy of my driver's license showing my actual address. Henderson took the stack. Sit tight. Don't leave the building. I sat on a wooden bench in the hallway. It was 8:45 a.m., 3 hours and 15 minutes until Deputy Romero had to clear my house. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. Dad, don't make this hard, Alex. Just let Caleb have the keys. We can talk about a rental deposit for you later. The audacity was breathtaking. They were stealing a $500,000 asset and offering me a rental deposit conversation. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. Evidence. I sat there watching lawyers in expensive suits rush past, talking about custody battles and settlements. I saw a woman crying near the water fountain, clutching divorce papers. This building was a factory of misery, and my parents had just punched my time card. 30 minutes later, the door to the inner chambers opened. A bailiff stepped out. Alexander Mercer? Here. I stood up. Judge Halpern will see you in chambers. Ex parte. Now. I followed him. In chambers meant a private meeting, not open court. It meant the judge wanted answers fast. Judge Halpern was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She was sitting behind a massive desk covered in files. She didn't look up when I walked in. Mr. Mercer, she said. Mr. Henderson tells me you claim you were never served and that the deed in the file is a forgery. That's correct, Your Honor, I said. And you have an eviction scheduled for noon today? Yes, Your Honor. Deputy Romero is waiting at the property. She looked up then. She held up the quitclaim deed. This document says you gave the house to your parents. Did you? No, Your Honor. I did not. I would never do that. My grandfather left that house to me specifically to keep it away from them. And the notary? Carla Mendez. She is a personal friend of my mother. I was not in her presence on the 13th. I was at work. Judge Halpern stared at me for a long beat. She was assessing my credibility. I stood straight, looked her in the eye. I didn't fidget. She reached for her phone. She dialed a number on speaker. Civil Division, a voice answered. This is Judge Halprin. Pull the file for Mercer versus Mercer. I am issuing an immediate stay of execution on the writ of possession. Call the sheriff's dispatch. Tell Deputy Romero to stand down. No one enters that property. I felt my knees go weak with relief. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet, she snapped. I'm staying the eviction because there is a colorable claim of fraud. But we are going to get to the bottom of this. I am setting an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I want the plaintiffs here. I want their lawyer here. And I want this notary, Carla Mendez, here. She scribbled on a piece of paper. You will serve this order on the plaintiff's counsel today. Do you have a lawyer? No, Your Honor. I can't afford one on this notice. I spent my savings on the house repairs. Then you are pro se, she said, representing yourself. It's risky, Mr. Mercer. But if what you say is true, the facts are your best lawyer. Bring your proof. Bring your work logs. If you can prove you weren't there on the 13th, your parents are in very serious trouble. She handed me the order. Emergency stay granted. Go, she said. Save your house. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I had just defused a bomb with seconds to spare. But the war wasn't over. It was just starting. I called Deputy Romero. Romero, he answered. It's Alex Mercer. The judge issued a stay. She's notifying dispatch now. I heard him exhale. A long, weary sound. I just got the radio call. You're lucky, kid. Your dad was just walking up the driveway with a locksmith. A locksmith? My hand tightened on the phone. Yeah. He wanted to change the cylinders before noon. I told him to back off. They're not happy. Tell them to save their energy, I said. I'll see them in court tomorrow. I hung up. Now I had 24 hours to prove a conspiracy. I needed two things. I needed the employment logs to prove I was at work. And I needed to know more about that deed. I drove to the county recorder's office. It was in the basement of the administration building next door. The line was shorter here. I got a clerk named Clara. She was young, efficient, wearing a headset. I need to see a recorded deed, I said. And I need to flag a property for potential fraud. Clara typed the address. Maples Terrace? No, the property is on Elm Street. The service was at Maple. She pulled up the record. Ah, here it is. Quit claim. Recorded 2 weeks ago. Can I see the original scan? High resolution. She turned the screen. I leaned in. I looked at the notary stamp again. Carla Mendez. But something looked off. I squinted. Can you zoom in on the commission number? I asked. Clara zoomed in. The number was 884-2931. But the 3 looked dark, thick. Does that look altered to you? I asked. Clara leaned in, her nose almost touching the screen. It looks like. Maybe it was an 8, and someone tried to turn it into a 3 with a pen before scanning. Or a 3 turned into an 8, I said. Why would they do that? If the commission was expired, Clara said. Or if the number was wrong and they tried to fix it by hand instead of restamping. That's a violation. We shouldn't have accepted this if it was altered by hand. Can you print the metadata? I asked. I want to know exactly when this was scanned and who brought it in. I can't tell you who brought it in, Clara said. But, wait, there's a note in the intake log. Filer requested rush recording. Paid rush fee cash. Cash, I said. My dad always carried cash. He thought it made him untraceable. I need a certified copy of this, I said. And I need a fraud alert placed on the title, so they can't sell it or borrow against it before tomorrow. Done, Clara said. She stamped the paper. Certified. I left the recorder's office with the smoking gun. Now I needed the bullet. I drove to my office. It was a sleek glass building in the tech district. I worked for Sentinel Systems, a firm that designed physical and digital security for banks and government buildings. I walked in, flashing my badge. The irony wasn't lost on me. I secured fortresses for a living, and I had let my own gates fall. I went straight to Sarah, the head of internal security. She was a tough woman who ran the server logs. "Alex?" she asked, looking at my jeans and sweatshirt. "You're not on the schedule today. I need a favor, Sarah. A big one. Life or death." She saw my face. She stopped typing. "What do you need?" "I need my access logs for the 13th of this month. Badge swipes. Parking garage timestamps. And if you have it, video footage of the server room." "The 13th? That's 2 weeks ago. We keep video for 30 days. Logs forever." She typed quickly. "Mercer, Alexander. Date, 13th. The screen filled with data. 7:45 a.m. Garage entry. License plate recog. Ford F-150. 7:52 a.m. Lobby turnstile. Badge swipe. 8 a.m. Server room B. Biometric scan. Retina. 12:15 p.m. Break room. Badge swipe. 12:45 p.m. Server room B. Biometric scan. 6:10 p.m. Garage exit. "I was here," I said, pointing at the 12:15 p.m. entry. "I was in the break room at noon." "Yeah, you were," Sarah said. "And here's the video." She clicked a file. On the screen, grainy but clear, was me, standing in the break room, heating up a Tupperware container of lasagna, talking to a colleague. "Can you export this?" I asked. "Certified? With the timestamp burned in?" "Sure," Sarah said. "What's this for? You in trouble?" "No," I said, watching the video of myself eating lunch while, miles away, my mother was forging my signature. "I'm not in trouble. But someone else is about to be." I walked out of my office with a USB drive and a stack of certified logs. Felt heavier than it looked. Felt like a weapon. It was 2 p.m. I had the stay order. I had the proof the deed was fake. I had the proof the service was fake. But I needed one more thing. I needed to look them in the eye. I drove back to my house. The silver sedan was gone. Caleb's Porsche was gone. The street was quiet. Deputy Romero had left a neon orange sticker on my door, the notice of the stay. I unlocked the door and went inside. The house smelled stale, like stress and old coffee. I walked through the rooms, checking for damage. They hadn't gotten in. The locks were still mine. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. I needed the caffeine. My head was pounding. Then my phone rang. It wasn't my parents'. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Mr. Mercer?" A smooth, oily voice. "This is Lawrence Pike. I represent your parents." Lawrence Pike, the strip mall lawyer my dad used for his frivolous lawsuits. The guy who helped him sue a dry cleaner for ruining a shirt that was already stained. "What do you want, Pike?" I asked. "I received a copy of your little motion," Pike said, chuckling dismissively. "Very dramatic, but futile. Is it?" "Listen, Alex. Can I call you Alex? Your parents are very hurt. They tried to do this quietly. They wanted to manage the asset for the family's benefit. You're single. You don't need a 3-bedroom house. Caleb he's starting a business. He needs the equity. He needs to pay off gambling debts," I corrected. "I know about the poker games, Pike. I know about the bookies." Pike paused. "Allegations. Irrelevant. Look, we have a signed deed. Notarized. You can claim you were at work, but notaries are officers of the court. Her word against yours. And we have the lease. You're a tenant, Alex, and you haven't paid rent." "I'm the owner," I said. "And tomorrow, I'm going to prove it." "If you go to court tomorrow," Pike's voice dropped, losing the oily charm, "we will file for back rent. We will garnish your wages. We will ruin your credit so bad you won't be able to buy a bicycle, let alone a house. Drop the motion. Move out. We'll give you $5,000 cash for your trouble." $5,000? I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "The house is worth $600,000. Go to hell, Pike." I hung up. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera I had installed last year, a high-def doorbell cam that uploaded directly to the cloud. It was them. Mom, Dad, Caleb. They were back. I walked to the door, but I didn't open it. I spoke through the heavy wood. Go away. Alex. My mother's voice was shrill. Open this door. We need to talk. You're embarrassing us. I'm embarrassing you? I asked. You sent a sheriff to throw me on the street at dawn. It's for your own good, she shouted. You're selfish. You've always been selfish. Grandpa Joe wanted the house to be for everyone. Grandpa Joe left it to me because he knew you'd sell it to buy Caleb a new toy. I shouted back. Hey! Caleb's voice. Watch your mouth. Open the door, Alex. Let's just sign some papers and work this out. Dad says you can live in the basement if you sign the quitclaim again just to, clear up the confusion. Live in the basement? I felt the blood pounding in my ears. Of my own house? It's not your house. My dad roared. He sounded drunk. Or just furious. It's family property. I'm the patriarch. I decide. You're a thief, Mark, I said. And tomorrow the judge is going to tell you the same thing. If you show up tomorrow, Caleb said, his voice lowering, pressing close to the door, you're going to regret it. I know people, Alex. I know where you work. I held my phone up, recording the audio. Are you threatening me, Caleb? I'm just saying, Caleb hissed. Accidents happen. Systems crash. People get fired. Get off my porch, I said. Or I'm calling Deputy Romero back. And this time, he'll be taking you away. There was a silence. Then I heard my mother sob, a fake theatrical sob. He hates us, Mark. Our own son hates us. Let's go, my dad grunted. We'll crush him in court. Pike says the deed is solid. I heard footsteps retreating. I heard the car doors slam. I heard the Porsche engine roar to life. A sound of pure arrogance. I stood there in the hallway, shaking. Not from fear. From rage. They were willing to destroy me. They were willing to make me homeless. They were willing to threaten my career. All for money. All for Caleb. I looked at the life or death folder on the table. I had the logs. I had the deed. But I needed to break the weak link. Carla Mendez. I didn't call her. That would be tampering with a witness. But I did look her up. I looked up her notary record online. She had been a notary for 10 years. No complaints. Clean record. She was a nice lady who made bad choices in friends. Why did she do it? Money? Pressure? I remembered something. Last Christmas, Carla had been complaining about her husband's medical bills. The cost of insulin. The struggle. My parents didn't just ask her for a favor. They probably paid her. Or promised to pay her once they sold the house. If that was true, if there was a financial transaction, it was conspiracy. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I organized my exhibits. Exhibit A, the real deed. Exhibit B, the fake deed. Exhibit C, my badge logs. Exhibit D, the video of me at 12:15 p.m. Exhibit E, the proof of service at the wrong address. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat in the living room, watching the sun come up again. At 8 a.m., I showered, shaved, and put on my best suit. It was a charcoal gray suit I usually saved for client presentations. I tied my tie with military precision. I looked in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked older than 34. But I looked ready. For Grandpa Joe, I whispered. I grabbed my briefcase. I checked the lock on the front door. I drove to the courthouse. The parking lot was full. I saw the Porsche. It was double parked, taking up 2 spaces. Of course. I walked into the building. The air was cool and smelled of floor wax and anxiety. I went to courtroom 4B. Judge Halpern's courtroom. My parents were already there. They were sitting at the plaintiff's table with Lawrence Pike. Pike was wearing a shiny blue suit and laughing at something my dad said. My mom was wearing a muted beige dress, looking small and fragile. Caleb was in the back row, chewing gum, looking at his phone. When I walked in, the laughter stopped. My dad glared. My mom looked away. Pike gave me a predatory smile. And then I saw her, Carla Mendez. She was sitting in the second row behind my parents. She looked terrified. Her face was pale, her hands clutching a purse so tight her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at anyone. She was staring at her shoes. She was the weak link, and I was going to break her. All rise. The bailiff's voice boomed. We all stood up. Judge Halpern swept into the room, her black robe flowing. She didn't look tired today. She looked like a predator entering her hunting grounds. She sat down. Be seated. She opened the file. Case CV 2024-8991. Mercer versus Mercer. Emergency hearing on motion to vacate default and motion to stay. She looked over her reading glasses at the plaintiff's table. Mr. Pike, you represent the parents. I do, Your Honor, Pike said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. And we are frankly shocked that we are here. We have a valid judgment. We have a valid deed. The defendant is simply suffering from seller's remorse. Or perhaps a mental break. Seller's remorse? Judge Halpern repeated. He claims he never sold it. We have a signed, notarized deed, Your Honor, Pike said, holding up the document. It is presumptively valid under the law. The defendant signed it on the 13th of this month. He agreed to transfer the title to his parents to settle family debts. Family debts. I stood up. I don't have family debts. They owe me money. Mr. Mercer, sit down, Judge Halpern said. But her voice wasn't harsh. You will get your turn. She turned back to Pike. So your position is that Alexander Mercer appeared before a notary on the 13th and signed this deed? Yes, Your Honor. And where did this signing take place? Pike hesitated. He leaned down and whispered to my mother. She whispered back. At the parents' home, Your Honor, Pike said. At 12 p.m. Lunchtime. I see, Judge Halpern said. She wrote something down. Then she looked at me. Mr. Mercer, your turn. Where were you at 12 p.m. on the 13th? I stood up. My hands were steady. Your Honor, I work for Sentinel Systems. We design high-security architecture for government contractors. Our facility is a secure environment. We are tracked by badge, biometric scanner, and camera. I walked to the bailiff and handed him my binder. May I approach? You may. I handed a copy to Pike, who sneered at it. Exhibit C, I said. These are certified access logs from my employer's internal security server. If you look at the entry for the 13th, you will see that I badged into the parking garage at 7:45 a.m. Judge Halpern flipped the page. And, I continued, I badged into the server room, which requires a retina scan, at 8 a.m. I did not leave the building until 6:10 p.m. Pike jumped up. Objection. These are computer printouts. They could be fabricated. They are certified by the head of security, Sarah Jenkins, with a sworn affidavit attached, I said calmly. Judge Halpern looked at the affidavit. Overruled. Continue, Mr. Mercer. Now, specifically regarding the time of the alleged signing, I said. Mr. Pike stated it happened at noon. Lunchtime. I pointed to the next tab. Exhibit D. This is a frame-by-frame export of the security camera in the Sentinel Systems break room. Timestamp. 12:15 p.m. the 13th. Judge Halpern looked at the photo. It was me, holding a fork, talking to a coworker. That is clearly me, I said. And that is clearly not my parents' house. The courtroom was silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. Judge Halpern looked at the photo. Then she looked at the deed. Then she looked at Pike. Mr. Pike, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous chill. Your client claims the defendant was at their house at noon. The defendant has high-definition proof he was 10 miles away in a secure facility. Pike was sweating now. He loosened his collar. Your Honor, perhaps the time was approximate. Maybe it was later in the day. Or maybe, Judge Halpern said, it never happened. She turned her gaze to the second row. Is Carla Mendez in the courtroom? Carla stood up slowly. She looked like she might faint. Yes, Your Honor. Come to the stand. Bring your notary journal. Carla walked to the witness stand. Her steps were heavy. She sat down, clutching her black journal. Do you swear to tell the truth? The clerk asked. I do, she whispered. Judge Halpern leaned forward. Ms. Mendez, you notarized this deed. Yes. Did you witness Alexander Mercer sign it? Carla's eyes darted to my mother. My mother was staring at her, eyes wide, pleading. Don't do it. Don't tell. Ms. Mendez, Judge Halpern said sharply. Look at me. Do not look at the plaintiffs. Look at me. Carla looked at the judge. You are a commission holder, the judge said. If you lie to me now in the face of this security footage, you will not only lose your commission. I will refer you to the district attorney for perjury and fraud. You could go to prison. Do you understand? Carla started to cry. Quiet, shaking sobs. Now, the judge said gently but firmly. Did Alexander Mercer sign that deed in front of you? Carla took a breath. She looked at the journal. She looked at me. No, she sobbed. A gasp went through the room. My mother let out a sharp cry. Pike slumped in his chair. He wasn't there, Carla said, the words tumbling out now. Diane brought me the deed. It was already signed. She said Alex signed it earlier but had to rush back to work. She asked me to stamp it as a favor. She said they were just trying to help him manage his money. She said he agreed to it. So you notarized a signature you didn't witness? Judge Halpern asked. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And the date? Judge Halpern asked. The 13th. Diane told me to backdate it, Carla confessed. She brought it to me 3 days ago, but she said it needed to be dated the 13th to match. Something about taxes. I didn't know. 3 days ago, I said aloud, after they filed the eviction. Judge Halpern sat back. She looked at my parents. The look on her face was one of pure disgust. Mark and Diane Mercer. Stand up. My parents stood up. My dad looked deflated, red-faced. My mom was trembling, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, tears of fear. You forged a signature, Judge Halpern said. You coerced a notary. You filed a fraudulent eviction. You attempted to steal a title. We, Your Honor, Pike stammered. My clients. Sit down, Mr. Pike, Judge Halpern roared. Before I hold you in contempt too. Pike sat down so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. Judge Halpern turned back to my parents. You manipulated the court system to harm your own son. You lied on sworn documents. She banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. The motion to vacate default judgment is granted. The eviction is dismissed with prejudice. The quit-claim deed is declared void ab initio, invalid from the start. She wasn't done. Deputy, she signaled the bailiff, take Ms. Mendez into custody. I am holding her in contempt pending a review by the DA. Carla wailed as the bailiff approached her. And as for the plaintiffs, Judge Halpern said, her eyes boring into my parents, I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office for investigation into real estate fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. I suggest you get a criminal defense attorney. Mr. Pike cannot help you there. My mother screamed. No, we didn't mean to. It's our house. Alex, tell her. She turned to me. Alex, fix this. Tell her we're family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had sold me out for a Porsche payment for her favorite son. I stood up. We're not family, I said. Not anymore. The chaos that followed those words was something I will never forget. My mother was sobbing, reaching out towards me across the wooden railing that separated the gallery from the litigants. Alex, please, don't let them take us. The bailiff was moving toward my parents now. They weren't being arrested right that second. The DA referral takes time to process, but the threat hung over them like a guillotine blade. Mr. Mercer, Judge Halpern addressed me one last time. I am also issuing a permanent restraining order. Mark, Diane, and Caleb Mercer are not to come within 500 feet of you or your property. If they do, call the police immediately. It will be a violation of a court order. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. I gathered my files. My life or death folder. I turned to leave. Caleb was standing near the door. He wasn't chewing gum anymore. He looked pale, sweaty. He looked like a kid who just realized the adults couldn't save him. Alex, he stammered as I walked past. Alex, wait. The car? The Porsche. I used the house as collateral for the loan. A bridge loan. If the deed is void. I stopped. I looked at him. You took a loan against a house you didn't own. I asked. Mom said it was ours. Caleb pleaded. The loan shark, the lender, they're gonna come for the car. They might come for me. You have to help me cover the interest until I can sell my crypto. Sell the Porsche, Caleb? I said coldly. I can't. I'm upside down on it. Not my problem, I said. You have legs. Walk. I pushed past him and walked out of the courtroom. I walked down the long hallway, past the other courtrooms, past the clerks, past the misery. I walked out into the bright sunshine of the parking lot. The air smelled different. It smelled clean. I walked to my truck. I saw the Porsche still double-parked. A tow truck was backing up to it. I stopped to watch. The driver hopped out and started hooking up the chains. Hey! Caleb ran out of the courthouse, waving his arms. Hey! That's my car. What are you doing? Parking violation, the tow driver said, not even looking up. And I got a repo order popped up on the scan. Title issue. Caleb stood there, helpless, watching his status symbol being dragged away. My parents came out a moment later, looking shell-shocked. My dad was yelling at Pike on the phone. My mom was weeping into a tissue. They looked small. They looked pathetic. I got in my truck and drove away. I drove straight to the house. My house. I pulled into the driveway. It was empty. No silver sedan. No police cruiser. Just my house, standing there in the afternoon sun. The dogwood tree Grandpa Joe planted was blooming, white petals drifting onto the grass. I walked up the steps. I peeled the orange sheriff sticker off the door. It left a little residue, but I could scrub that off. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence was profound. It wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of ownership, of peace. I locked the door behind me. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were finally steady. I sat down at the table where Grandpa Joe used to sit. I ran my hand over the wood grain. I did it, Grandpa, I whispered. I was smarter. That evening, I did the practical things. I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed to high-security Medeco cylinders. I called my security company and upgraded the perimeter sensors. Then, I sat down on the living room floor and opened the old metal box Grandpa Joe had left for me, the one I kept in the safe. Inside, beneath the old photos and the war medals, was a small leather diary. I hadn't read it in years. I opened it to the last entry. Alex, if you are reading this, it means they finally showed their true colors. I'm sorry. No boy should have to fight his own parents. But you are strong. You are the builder. They are just tenants in this life. You are the owner. Build something good. I closed the book. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were good tears. Tears of release. The next 3 months were a blur of legal paperwork. But this time, I was on the winning side. The district attorney took Judge Halperin's referral seriously. Very seriously. Real estate fraud is a hot-button issue, and my parents had handed them a perfect case. The investigation revealed that this wasn't the first time my dad had tried something shaky with documents, but it was the first time he'd been caught so blatantly. Carla Mendez took a plea deal. She lost her notary commission permanently and got 2 years of probation in exchange for testifying against my parents. She told the DA everything. How my mother had begged. How my father had offered her $500 from the proceeds of the house sale. $500. That was the price of her integrity. My parents were charged with forgery, filing false documents, and conspiracy to commit grand theft. They didn't go to prison. Not for long, anyway. They had no prior criminal record, so their lawyer, a new one, not Pike, managed to get them a plea deal. 5 years of probation, massive fines, and a suspended sentence. But the real punishment wasn't jail. It was the social ruin. The story got out. Small towns talk, and suburbs talk faster. The respectable Mark and Diane Mercer were pariahs. They were kicked out of their country club. Their friends stopped calling. And the financial ruin was total. To pay the legal fees and the fines, they had to sell their own house. The big house on the hill they were so proud of. They downsized to a small apartment across town. As for Caleb, the golden child crashed hard. Without the Porsche, without the promise of my house equity to float his loans, his house of cards collapsed. He had to declare bankruptcy. The last I heard, he was working at a car rental agency near the airport, washing cars that were nicer than anything he would ever own again. He tried to call me once. About a month after the trial. "Alex, come on," he'd said, his voice whiny. "Mom is depressed. Dad is... he's old. Just come over for dinner. Let's put this behind us." "I have put it behind me," I said. "I'm looking forward." "You're cold, man," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm secure." I hung up and blocked the number. I spent the summer fixing up the house. I painted the shutters a deep navy blue. I fixed the porch steps. I planted a garden in the back. Tomatoes, peppers, and basil just like Grandpa Joe used to grow. One Saturday morning, I was out in the garden, weeding. The sun was warm on my back. "Nice tomatoes," a voice called out. I looked up. It was Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor. She was leaning over the fence, holding a basket of muffins. "Thanks, Mrs. Higgins," I said. "I saw the police car at your folks' place last week," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Serving papers for the lawsuit from the bank?" "I think so," I said. She nodded, satisfied. "Karma is a slow driver, Alex, but she never misses an address." I laughed. "No, she doesn't." She handed me the muffins. "You're a good boy, Alex. Your grandfather would be proud. You kept the house." "I intend to keep it for a long time," I said. I went inside and made coffee. I sat on the back porch eating a muffin, looking at the dogwood tree. I realized something. For years I had been carrying a weight. The weight of trying to please them. The weight of trying to be the good son to people who only saw me as a resource. The weight of protecting Caleb from his own mistakes. That weight was gone. The eviction notice hadn't just tried to kick me out of my house. It had kicked me out of their dysfunction. It was the best thing they ever did for me. I took a sip of coffee. Tasted like freedom. It's been a year now. The house is fully renovated. I turned the basement, the place they wanted to banish me to, into a state-of-the-art home theater and gaming room. My friends come over on Sundays for football. We grill steaks. We laugh. I met someone, too. Sarah from work, the security chief who helped me with the logs. We started grabbing lunch together after the trial, swapping war stories about security breaches. One thing led to another. She moved in last month. She loves the house. She loves the dogwood tree. Sometimes, late at night, I think about my parents. I wonder if they're sitting in their small apartment, blaming me. I wonder if they tell themselves a version of the story where they are the victims, where the ungrateful son stole their property. I'm sure they do. That's how they survive. But their version of the story doesn't have a stamp from the county recorder. Mine does. I learned a hard lesson that day at 6 a.m. Family isn't about blood. Blood is just biology. Blood is just an accident of birth. Family is about loyalty. It's about respect. It's about who stands beside you when the pounding starts at the door, and who is standing across the street waiting for you to fall. If you are going through something like this, if you have people in your life who feel entitled to your hard work, who manipulate you with guilt, who use the word family as a weapon to disarm you, I want you to listen to me closely. Lock your doors. Check your paperwork. And don't be afraid to change the locks. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, even if they are your parents, especially if they are holding the match. This is the moment that changed everything for me. It was the moment I stopped being Alexander the son and started being Alexander the man. I took back my house. But more importantly, I took back my life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive those moments, to feel that pounding in my chest again, but I wanted to share it with you because I know I'm not alone. I know there are others out there fighting battles in their own living rooms. I hope this story touched you, or maybe gave you the courage to check your own boundaries. Have you ever had a family member try to take advantage of you financially? Did you have to draw a line in the sand? I want to hear your story. Please share it in the comments below. Let's support each other. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more people find this channel, and it tells me that these stories matter to you. Until next time, keep your doors locked and your deeds recorded. Stay safe.